The stagecoach rattled into Weaverville, California on a humid afternoon in August 1878, carrying a woman who hadn't slept peacefully in 3 years, and the dust from the journey clung to her dark traveling dress like a shroud of her former life. Adelaide Brennan stepped down onto the wooden sidewalk with trembling hands, clutching a single worn carpetbag that contained everything she owned in this world, and searched the sparse crowd for the man whose letters had promised her safety, a home, and perhaps redemption from the shadows that plagued her nights. The mining town sprawled along the Trinity River, a collection of false-fronted buildings and rough-hewn structures that had seen better days since the gold rush fever had cooled. Adelaide was 24 years old, though the nightmares had aged her eyes beyond her years. She smoothed her skirts and tried to appear composed, the way a proper mail-order bride should look when meeting her intended husband for the first time. But inside, her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird, and she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake coming here, running from one danger only to walk into another unknown. "Miss Brennan." A gravelly voice spoke behind her, and Adelaide spun around so quickly she nearly dropped her bag. The man standing there was not the one she expected. She had correspondence from a merchant named Samuel Whitmore, a widower seeking companionship and help running his general store. But this man wore dusty chaps and a weathered Stetson, and his sun-darkened face bore the hard lines of someone who spent his days working cattle under an unforgiving sky. He was perhaps 27 or 28, tall and lean with broad shoulders, and his gray-green eyes studied her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I am Adelaide Brennan," she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I am looking for Mr. Samuel Whitmore." The cowboy removed his hat, revealing hair the color of sand that needed cutting. "I am afraid I have some difficult news, miss. Sam Whitmore passed on 2 weeks ago. Heart gave out while he was lifting supplies. It was quick, and he did not suffer much." The ground seemed to tilt beneath Adelaide's feet. She had spent her last dollars on the train ticket and stagecoach fare. She had burned every bridge behind her, leaving St. Louis in the dead of night with nothing but the clothes on her back and the terrible memories that woke her screaming. There was nowhere left to run, no one left to turn to. "I see," she whispered, though she did not see at all. Everything was crumbling again the way it always did. "My name is Garrett Pierce," the cowboy said, and something in his voice was unexpectedly gentle. "Sam was my uncle. I inherited his property, including the store. I found your letters in his desk, and when I realized you might still be coming, I wanted to meet you myself to explain the situation." Adelaide nodded numbly. Of course. She should have known better than to hope for anything resembling stability. The universe had been teaching her that lesson repeatedly since the night her husband had died and taken her innocence with him in ways that still made her wake gasping for air. "I will find work somewhere," she said, though she had no idea where or how. Women's options were limited, especially for those without references or family connections. "Thank you for telling me in person, Mr. Pierce." She turned to leave, though she had nowhere to go, and felt his hand gently touch her elbow. "Wait," Garrett said. "Please. At least let me buy you supper, and we can talk about this properly. You have come a long way, and I expect you are hungry and tired." Adelaide should have declined. She should have maintained proper distance and propriety. But exhaustion and hunger won out over caution, and she found herself nodding. Garrett picked up her carpetbag before she could protest and led her down the main street toward a modest restaurant. The meal was simple but filling, beef stew and fresh bread that Adelaide ate slowly, trying to remember her manners despite her stomach's demands. Garrett watched her with those steady eyes, not speaking until she had taken the edge off her hunger. "I read some of the letters you exchanged with Sam," he said finally. "I know that is an invasion of privacy and I apologize, but I wanted to understand the arrangement he had made." Adelaide's hand stilled on her spoon. Had Samuel written about her past? She had been careful in her letters, revealing only that she was a widow seeking a fresh start. Nothing more. Never more than that. "Sam was a good man," Garrett continued. "He wanted companionship, someone to help with the store, and he was willing to offer marriage for that. I respected him greatly, and I want to honor his commitments if I can." "What are you proposing, Mr. Pierce?" Adelaide asked, though dread pooled in her stomach. She had met men who made proposals before, and they never ended well for women in desperate situations. "I am proposing nothing improper," Garrett said quickly, as if reading her thoughts. "The store needs managing. I am a cattleman, not a shopkeeper, and I have been trying to run both Sam's ranch and his business for 2 weeks now. It is not working. You need employment and a place to stay. I could hire you to manage the store, and you could live in the apartment above it. Sam's old living quarters. They are simple but clean." Adelaide studied him carefully, searching for deception or hidden motives, but Garrett's weathered face remained open and honest. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" "Because Sam wanted to help you," Garrett replied, "and because I recognize the look of someone running from something. I am not asking what you are running from, Miss Brennan. I am just offering you a place to stop running if you want it." The words struck something deep inside Adelaide's chest. She blinked rapidly against the sudden burn of tears. "I accept your offer, Mr. Pierce, and thank you." "Garrett," he said. "Just call me Garrett. We are not formal people out here." Adelaide managed a small smile. "Then you must call me Adelaide." They finished the meal in more comfortable silence, and afterward, Garrett showed her to the general store. It was a solid building on the main street, 2 stories with large windows displaying various goods. The apartment above was indeed simple, just 2 rooms with a small kitchen area and a bedroom, but it was clean and smelled of pine soap. There was a real bed with a quilt, a table with 2 chairs, and even a rocking chair by the window. "I will leave you to get settled," Garrett said, setting her carpet bag down. "The store opens at 8 in the morning. I will come by tomorrow to show you how Sam kept the books and where everything is stored." "Garrett," Adelaide said as he turned to leave, "why did you wait for the stage coach? You could have simply left a message with someone in town." He paused in the doorway, his hat in his hands. "I wanted to see who you were, to make sure you were not left stranded. Sam would have wanted that." After he left, Adelaide sank onto the bed and allowed herself to cry for the first time since leaving Missouri. They were not tears of sadness exactly, but rather a release of tension that had been building for years. She had expected nothing, and she had been given a chance. It was more than she deserved, considering what she carried with her. That night, the nightmares came as they always did. Adelaide found herself back in the small house in St. Louis, watching her husband Henry stumble through the door drunk and angry. She relived every blow, every cruel word. Every night she spent cowering in corners praying he would pass out before he killed her. She saw again the final night, when he had come at her with a kitchen knife, and she had grabbed the poker from the fireplace and swung it with all her desperate strength. She felt the sickening impact, saw him fall, watched the blood pool beneath his head. The law had called it self-defense after seeing her bruises and hearing the neighbors' testimonies. But Henry's brother had not seen it that way. He had sworn vengeance, had hunted her through the streets of St. Louis with murder in his eyes. Adelaide had fled west, changing her name from Adelaide Henderson back to her maiden name of Brennan, always looking over her shoulder, always waiting for the past to catch up. She woke screaming into the darkness of her new bedroom, her nightgown soaked with sweat, her heart racing so fast she thought it might burst. It took several moments to remember where she was, to orient herself to these unfamiliar surroundings. She was in Weaverville, California, not St. Louis. She was safe, she was free. A sound from outside made her freeze. Footsteps on the wooden stairs leading to her apartment. Someone was out there. Terror seized Adelaide's throat. Henry's brother had found her. After all these miles, all this running, he had tracked her down. She scrambled from the bed and grabbed the only weapon she could find, a heavy candlestick from the bedside table. Her hands shook violently, but she forced herself to stand between the door and the window, ready to fight or flee. A soft knock came at the door. "Adelaide, it is Garrett. I heard you cry out. Are you all right?" Relief flooded through her so intensely that her knees nearly buckled. She set down the candlestick and moved to the door, cracking it open. Garrett stood on the landing, still fully dressed despite the late hour, concern etched across his features in the moonlight. "I am sorry," Adelaide whispered. "I had a nightmare. I did not mean to disturb you." "You did not disturb me," Garrett said quietly. "I was already awake. I have been sleeping in the store since Sam died, keeping an eye on things. I wanted to make sure you were safe." "You do not have to do that," Adelaide said, though gratitude warmed her chest. "I am sure I will be fine." Garrett's eyes searched her face in the dim light. "You have them often, do you not, the nightmares?" There was no judgment in his voice, only understanding. Adelaide found herself nodding before she could think better of it. "Yes, almost every night." "My father was in the war," Garrett said. "He had nightmares too until the day he died. They never fully went away, but having someone nearby helped, someone to remind him where he was when he woke up frightened." "I cannot ask you to lose sleep for me," Adelaide protested weakly. "You are not asking. I am offering." Garrett stepped back toward the stairs. "I will be downstairs if you need anything. Try to get some rest, Adelaide. You are safe here." Adelaide watched him descend the stairs and disappear into the darkened store below. She returned to her bed, but sleep eluded her for a long time. She kept thinking about the cowboy who had met a stranger's stagecoach, who had offered employment and shelter without asking for anything in return, who now stood guard against demons he could not see or fight. The next morning, Adelaide dressed in her other dress, a simple gray cotton that was more practical than the traveling costume. She pinned her auburn hair up carefully and descended to the store just as the clock struck 8. Garrett was already there, looking remarkably alert for someone who had spent the night on watch. "Good morning," he greeted her with a slight smile. "Coffee is on the stove in the back room. Help yourself while I unlock the front door." The day passed in a blur of learning. Garrett showed her the inventory system, the pricing structure, and the ledger where Sam had kept meticulous records of sales and purchases. Adelaide discovered she had a natural head for numbers and organization. By afternoon, she was managing transactions with customers while Garrett watched approvingly from near the back counter. The people of Weaverville were curious about the new woman in town, but most were polite enough not to pry too deeply. Adelaide kept her answers vague when asked about her background, and Garrett smoothly deflected more intrusive questions by introducing her as the new store manager. When evening came and Garrett prepared to leave for his ranch, Adelaide gathered her courage and said, "You do not have to sleep here tonight. I will be fine." Garrett paused, his hand on the door. "I will be back after dark anyway. Got to check on some things in the storeroom." It was an obvious excuse, but Adelaide did not call him on it. She simply nodded and watched him go, feeling something warm and unfamiliar kindle in her chest. The pattern repeated for several weeks. Adelaide managed the store during the day, growing more confident in her abilities and her interactions with the townspeople. Garrett divided his time between the ranch and the store, always finding reasons to be nearby when evening came. And each night, when the nightmares came and Adelaide woke screaming, she would hear his footsteps on the stairs, his gentle knock on the door, his steady voice reminding her that she was safe. Slowly, without Adelaide fully realizing when it began, the nightmares started to lose some of their power. They still came, but she woke more quickly, oriented herself faster. And knowing that Garrett was downstairs, that someone was watching over her with no expectation of anything in return, made the darkness less suffocating. One evening in late September, Adelaide finished closing the store and found Garrett sitting on the steps outside, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of amber and rose. She hesitated, then sat down beside him, leaving a respectable distance between them. "The books balanced perfectly today," she said, "and we had our best sales week since I arrived." "Sam would be proud," Garrett replied. "You have a real talent for this." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Adelaide asked the question that had been building in her mind. "Why do you really stay here at night, Garrett? And please do not tell me it is about the storeroom inventory." He turned to look at her, and the honesty in his gray-green eyes made her breath catch. "Because you are afraid when you sleep, and I know what it is like to be afraid and alone. After my father died, I spent 2 years jumping at shadows, expecting danger around every corner. Someone helped me then, just sat with me until I learned to breathe again. I figured maybe I could do the same for you." "Who hurt you?" Adelaide asked softly. "Raiders, during the tail end of the war. I was 16. They burned our farm, killed my mother." Garrett's jaw tightened. "My father and I survived, but something in both of us broke that day. Took a long time to heal, and some parts never did fully." Adelaide felt tears prick her eyes. "I am sorry, I did not know." "And I do not know what haunts your dreams," Garrett said gently. "But I do not need to know. Whatever it is, it does not define who you are now. I see how you treat people in the store, how you give credit to families who are struggling, how you always have peppermint sticks for the children. That is who you are, Adelaide, not whatever ghosts chase you at night." The tears spilled over then, tracking down Adelaide's cheeks. She had been so certain that her past had poisoned everything about her, that the violence she had committed made her irredeemable. But Garrett was looking at her like she mattered, like she was worth protecting and caring for. "I killed my husband," Adelaide heard herself say, the words escaping before she could stop them. "He was beating me, had been for 2 years, and one night he came at me with a knife. I hit him with a fireplace poker. The law said it was self-defense, but his brother swore revenge. I have been running ever since, afraid he will find me and finish what Henry started." She waited for Garrett to recoil, to stand up and distance himself from her. Instead, he moved closer and gently took her hand in his calloused one. "Then you are a survivor," Garrett said firmly. "And if this brother ever shows his face here, he will have to go through me first. I will not let anyone hurt you, Adelaide. Not ever again." The conviction in his voice made something inside Adelaide's chest crack wide open. She had not felt safe in so long, had not allowed herself to trust anyone or anything. But sitting here with this cowboy who had given up his sleep to guard her dreams, she felt the first real stirrings of hope. "I think I am falling in love with you," Adelaide whispered, shocked by her own boldness. Garrett's hand tightened on hers. "I think I have been falling in love with you since the day you stepped off that stagecoach looking terrified but determined. I did not plan it, and I was not looking for it, but here we are." "Here we are," Adelaide echoed, and then Garrett was leaning in and she was meeting him halfway, and their lips touched in a kiss that tasted of coffee and promise and new beginnings. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Garrett said, "I know this is fast. I know you came here expecting to marry Sam and that did not work out, but Adelaide, I would like to court you properly, if you will let me." "Yes," Adelaide said without hesitation. "Yes, I would like that very much." The courtship that followed was unlike anything Adelaide had experienced before. Garrett was patient and gentle, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. He brought her wildflowers from the mountains and taught her to ride horses on Sunday afternoons when the store was closed. They took long walks along the Trinity River, talking about everything and nothing, building the foundation of trust that both of them needed. Adelaide found herself laughing again, genuinely laughing, at Garrett's dry observations about ranch life and the quirks of Weaverville's residents. She learned that he had a passion for breeding good cattle and dreams of building his herd into something significant. He had worked hard since taking over his uncle's properties, and his dedication impressed her in turn. Adelaide shared more of her story, though the telling was not easy. She spoke of growing up in Philadelphia, the daughter of a schoolteacher who had died when she was 17. She described how she had met Henry Henderson, a charming merchant who had seemed like a good match, only to discover too late that he became a monster when he drank. She explained the years of walking on eggshells, trying to be perfect enough that he would not raise his fists, until the night when perfection was no longer enough. Garrett listened to every word, never interrupting, never judging. When she finished, he simply held her while she cried, his arms steady and strong around her. The nightmares continued, but they grew less frequent. Some nights Adelaide slept through peacefully, and on the nights when she woke afraid, Garrett was always there with his knock and his voice and his presence. He never asked to come into her room, never pressed for intimacy beyond the kisses they shared. He was content to wait until Adelaide was ready, and that patience meant everything to her. October brought cooler weather, and the first hints of autumn color to the mountain slopes. Adelaide had been in Weaverville for 2 months, and the store was thriving under her management. She had implemented several new ideas, including a credit system that helped struggling miners' families, and a corner dedicated to books and newspapers that became a gathering spot for the town's residents. She was arranging a new shipment of canned goods one afternoon when the bell over the door chimed and a stranger walked in. He was a big man, heavy through the shoulders, with cold blue eyes that swept the store before landing on Adelaide. Every instinct in her body screamed danger. "Help you with something?" Adelaide asked, keeping her voice level though her heart had started to race. "Looking for information," the man said, his voice rough as gravel. "Heard there was a new woman in town. Auburn hair, green eyes, came in on the stage coach a couple months back." Adelaide's blood turned to ice. She knew without asking who this man was or why he had come. Henry's brother had found her at last. "Cannot say I have heard about anyone like that," Adelaide lied, edging toward the back room where she knew Garrett kept a rifle. "Weaverville gets a lot of travelers passing through." "That is funny," the man said, moving closer, "because you match that description perfectly. Hello, Adelaide, or should I say Adelaide Henderson? I am Thomas Henderson. I believe you killed my brother." Adelaide's hand closed around the counter edge to steady herself. "The law ruled its self-defense. I have every right to be here and you have no right to threaten me." "The law was wrong," Thomas snarled, his face twisting with rage. "Henry was a good man and you murdered him in cold blood. I swore I would make you pay, and I keep my promises." He reached for something at his belt, and Adelaide realized with horror that it was a knife, long and wicked-looking. She screamed and ran for the back room, but Thomas was faster than his bulk suggested. He caught her arm and yanked her back, and the knife flashed in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. The front door crashed open with explosive force. Garrett stormed in, taking in the situation in an instant. He moved with the speed and precision of someone who had faced danger before, closing the distance between himself and Thomas in 3 long strides. His fist connected with Thomas's jaw with a crack that echoed through the store, and the bigger man stumbled backward, releasing Adelaide. "You touch her again and I will kill you," Garrett said, his voice deadly calm. "Get out of my store and out of my town." Thomas wiped blood from his split lip and glared at Garrett. "This is not your business, cowboy. This is family business." "Adelaide is my family," Garrett shot back. "That makes it my business. You have 10 seconds to leave before I drag you to the sheriff." "You cannot protect her forever," Thomas spat. "I will wait, I will watch, and when you are not looking I will finish this." "No, you will not," a new voice said from the doorway. Sheriff William Morrison stood there, his hand resting on his holstered pistol. He was a weathered man in his 50s, with a reputation for fair but firm justice. "I heard the commotion from down the street. Thomas Henderson, I am placing you under arrest for assault and threatening violence." Thomas looked between the sheriff, Garrett, and Adelaide, hatred burning in his eyes. "You cannot prove anything." "I just heard you threaten Miss Brennan myself," Sheriff Morrison said, "and I am sure there are witnesses to the assault." "You will cool off in my jail while I send some telegrams back east to St. Louis. I am betting there is a warrant out for you already." As it turned out, the sheriff's intuition was correct. Thomas Henderson had left St. Louis after beating a man nearly to death in a bar fight, and the authorities had been looking for him. With the new charges in California and the existing warrant, Thomas would be spending years in prison, far away from Adelaide. When the sheriff finally led Thomas away in handcuffs, Adelaide collapsed against the counter, shaking violently. Garrett was there instantly, his arms around her, holding her together as she fell apart. "It is over," he murmured into her hair. "He cannot hurt you anymore. You are safe, Adelaide." "You are safe." "I thought he would kill me," Adelaide sobbed. "I thought after everything, after finally finding somewhere I could breathe, he would take it all away." "Never," Garrett said fiercely. "I will never let anyone take you away from me. I love you, Adelaide Brennan. I love you more than I thought I could love anyone." Adelaide pulled back to look at him, seeing her own feelings reflected in his eyes. "I love you too. I have loved you for weeks now, maybe from the beginning. You made me believe I could have a future again." Garrett kissed her then, deep and passionate, pouring all his emotion into it. When they broke apart, he said, "Marry me, Adelaide. Not because of some mail-order arrangement or convenience, but because I want to spend every day for the rest of my life with you. Because I want to guard your dreams and wake up beside you and build something beautiful with you." "Yes," Adelaide said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I will marry you, Garrett Pierce." They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Weaverville. Adelaide wore a new dress of cream silk that she had ordered special from San Francisco, and Garrett wore his best suit, looking handsome and nervous in equal measure. The townspeople filled the pews, having adopted Adelaide as one of their own during her months managing the store. The ceremony was short but beautiful. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Garrett kissed Adelaide with such tenderness that several women in the congregation dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. Afterward, there was a reception at the hotel with food and dancing and celebration that lasted well into the evening. That night, Adelaide and Garrett finally shared a bed as husband and wife. Garrett was gentle and patient, mindful of Adelaide's history of trauma. He took his time, learning what brought her pleasure, always checking that she was comfortable and willing. Adelaide discovered that intimacy could be beautiful and healing when it was grounded in love and respect. In Garrett's arms, she finally understood what it meant to feel cherished. They spent the first months of their marriage figuring out how to blend their lives together. Garrett moved his things into the apartment above the store, though he still spent several days a week at the ranch managing his cattle operation. Adelaide continued running the store, discovering that she had a real talent for business. Together, they made plans to expand, talking late into the night about their dreams and ambitions. The nightmares did not disappear entirely, but they became rare enough that Adelaide began to feel truly rested. And when they did come, she would wake to find Garrett already awake beside her, his hand stroking her hair, his voice soft and reassuring in the darkness. "I am here," he would say. "You are safe. We are home." And Adelaide would believe him, because it was true. She had found home not in a place but in a person, in this cowboy who had stayed awake to guard her dreams until she learned to sleep peacefully again. The following spring brought new life to Weaverville and to the Pierce household. Adelaide discovered she was pregnant in March, and the joy on Garrett's face when she told him made her cry happy tears. He was attentive and protective throughout her pregnancy, always making sure she was comfortable and had everything she needed. Their son was born on a warm day in November 1879, a healthy baby boy with his father's gray-green eyes and his mother's determination. They named him Samuel, after Garrett's uncle who had inadvertently brought them together. Little Sam was the light of their lives, and Garrett proved to be a devoted father, staying up with Adelaide during late-night feedings and never complaining about lost sleep. "After all those months of staying awake to watch over you," he said one night, rocking Sam gently, "a few more sleepless nights with this little one seem like a blessing, not a burden." As Sam grew from baby to toddler, Adelaide and Garrett expanded their business. They purchased the building next to the general store and opened a feed and supply shop that catered to the area's ranchers and farmers. Garrett managed this new venture while Adelaide continued overseeing the general store, and together they built something substantial and lasting. Their daughter arrived 2 years after Sam, a red-haired beauty they named Emma, who had Adelaide's green eyes and fierce spirit. Garrett loved his daughter with the same devotion he showed his son, never subscribing to the idea that girls were less important than boys. He taught Emma to ride horses and check cattle right alongside her brother, insisting that Pierce children learned all aspects of the family business regardless of gender. Adelaide watched her husband with their children and marveled at how far she had come from that terrified woman on the stagecoach. She had believed herself broken beyond repair, tainted by violence and trauma. But Garrett had shown her that healing was possible, that love could overcome the darkest of pasts, and that new beginnings were always within reach if you were brave enough to grasp them. The years passed in the way that happy years do, quickly, and yet filled with countless precious moments. Adelaide and Garrett celebrated their 5th anniversary, then their 10th. They watched their children grow strong and confident, raised in a home filled with love and laughter. The businesses thrived, becoming cornerstones of Weaverville's economy and employing several local residents. Adelaide never forgot where she came from or what she had survived, but those memories lost their power to destroy her. She spoke openly with other women who came to her in confidence, sharing her story to help those trapped in violent situations understand that escape was possible, that they did not have to endure abuse, that there was no shame in fighting back or running away. She became known as someone who helped women in need, quietly providing employment or resources, or sometimes just a listening ear. Garrett supported these efforts fully, using his influence as a respected businessman to assist when necessary. Together, they made a real difference in their community. One evening in the summer of 1889, 11 years after they had first met, Adelaide and Garrett sat on the porch of the ranch house they had built overlooking the Trinity River. The sun was setting in brilliant streaks of orange and purple, and their children were inside finishing their homework under the watchful eye of their housekeeper. "You ever think about what might have happened if Sam had not died?" Adelaide asked, leaning against Garrett's shoulder. "If I had married him instead," Garrett wrapped his arm around her and pulled her close. "I try not to think about it because it makes me too sad imagining a life without you. Sam was a good man, and he would have treated you well. But he would not have been me, and you would not have been as happy." "No," Adelaide agreed softly. "I would not have been as happy. You are the love of my life, Garrett Pierce. You taught me to trust again, to hope again. You stood guard over my nightmares until I learned to dream peacefully. I could never have imagined feeling this complete, this content." "You did the same for me," Garrett said, kissing the top of her head. "I was lonely before you came, even though I did not realize it. I was just going through the motions of living, managing the ranch and the store without any real purpose. You gave me purpose, Adelaide. You gave me a reason to build something lasting, to dream about the future." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars begin to emerge in the darkening sky. Inside the house, they could hear Sam and Emma laughing about something, the sound of their joy floating out through the open windows. "I am grateful," Adelaide said quietly, "for all of it. Even for the hard parts that brought me here because they led me to you. I would not change a single thing about our story." "Neither would I," Garrett replied. "Not one moment." As night settled over the California mountains, Adelaide reflected on the long journey that had brought her to this moment. She had arrived in Weaverville broken and afraid, haunted by violence and trauma, carrying secrets that she believed made her unworthy of love or happiness. But she had found a man who saw past her scars to the strength beneath, who had guarded her dreams until she learned to sleep peacefully, who had loved her patiently and completely until she learned to love herself again. The mail-order bride with a past had become a wife, a mother, a businesswoman, and a pillar of her community. The cowboy who had stayed awake to guard her dreams had become her partner, her protector, and the love of her life. Together, they had built something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy, proving that redemption and second chances were always possible for those brave enough to reach for them. Years later, when Adelaide was an old woman surrounded by grandchildren and great-grandchildren, she would tell them about the day she stepped off a stagecoach in Weaverville with nothing but a carpet bag and a heart full of fear. She would describe the cowboy who had met her with kindness instead of judgment, who had offered safety instead of demands, who had loved her when she thought herself unlovable. And she would tell them that true love was not about grand gestures or perfect circumstances, but about showing up every day, about staying awake when someone needed you to guard their dreams, about choosing to build something together even when the foundation seemed shaky. True love was patient and persistent, and powerful enough to heal even the deepest wounds. The general store and feed supply shop eventually passed to Sam, who ran them with the same dedication his parents had shown. Emma became a teacher, fighting for better educational opportunities for girls throughout California, and carrying on her mother's legacy of helping women in need. Both children married well and raised families of their own, creating a sprawling Pierce clan that remained rooted in Weaverville for generations. Garrett and Adelaide lived to see their golden wedding anniversary in 1928, surrounded by dozens of descendants and a community that revered them as founding pillars. They remained devoted to each other until the very end, still holding hands and finishing each other's sentences after 50 years of marriage. When Garrett passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, Adelaide grieved deeply, but without the paralyzing fear that had once defined her life. She knew she would join him soon enough, and the thought brought comfort rather than terror. She had lived a full and beautiful life, had loved and been loved in return, had raised children who carried forward her values of compassion and strength. Adelaide followed her husband 6 months later, dying quietly in the ranch house they had built together, surrounded by family. Her last words were about Garrett, about how she could feel him waiting for her, ready to guard her dreams one more time. The townspeople of Weaverville mourned the passing of Adelaide Pierce, remembering her as a woman of remarkable courage and kindness who had transformed the life of their community. They spoke of her generosity, her business acumen, and her unwavering support for those in need. But most of all, they remembered the love story between Adelaide and Garrett, a testament to the healing power of patience, dedication, and genuine devotion. In the end, the mail-order bride who had arrived haunted by her past became a legend of hope and redemption. And the cowboy who had stayed awake to guard her dreams became immortalized as proof that true love exists, that some people are willing to fight for those they cherish, and that the best relationships are built not on passion alone, but on the foundation of respect, trust, and unwavering commitment. Their story lived on through their descendants and the community they had served, a reminder that no matter how dark the past might be, the future could shine bright for those brave enough to seize it, and that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with a simple act of kindness from a stranger who chooses to stay awake through someone else's nightmares until they learn to dream again.